What's up, you creepy fucks, and welcome to the Let's Talk Horror Channel podcast, and welcome to the Creep Zone, where we have very honest, passionate, I like that word, I always say that word, it sounds weird, but I say it, love it, we're a very unrated, unfiltered conversations about something from the world of horror. On today's episode, we're talking about an absolute classic, a classic from 70s horror. We know that they are the foundations of what horror has become. They are so important, but how important is this film? How important do I think this film is? I mean, I think I might raise a few eyebrows with that a little bit later on. But how important does my guest on this episode think it is? So with me today, I have Sammie. Sammie is the co-host from a zillion podcasts. From the Nerdy Up North podcast, the Monsters Up North podcast, which is your dedicated to horror podcast, I believe. Yeah. And then loads of what are all the bloody other ones you've got now?
My gosh, we got the main Nerdy Up North, Monsters Up North, Trekking Up North, Gaming Up North, Gigs Up North, Women of Pop Culture. That's it. I feel like that's it.
And I'm moaning about bloody doing one. Unbelievable. There we go. Well, anyway, look, thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for coming to the Creep Zone.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm honoured. Thank you.
Oh, no, the honour's all mine. Nobody, my little show. I'm surprised anybody wants to fucking come on it. But
I do.
Yeah, there we go. But as I said, we are talking about a 70s horror classic, and we can call it a classic because obviously it's very old. That's right. Sammie brought a t-shirt especially for it. We're talking about The Omen. What a movie in a way, but we get into that, and I can't honestly wait. This is going to be, anybody that's listened to the show or watched the show knows the podcast, knows that I always love talking about how important movies are to the iconography. I've said it. I've said another word, the word that I knew I was going to say and told everybody I wouldn't. The iconography of horror. It is a film that is part of that. I feel like the 70s is so important to horror and the genre. But I feel like the way that I'm going to be talking about this one later on might be a little bit controversial in a way. But honesty is key, as we all know that. And honesty is something that I have to be. So it's going to be the first one that's actually quite difficult for me to try and navigate, which I've already said to Sammie that I might pass out halfway through doing this one, trying to navigate how I still talk about this film on a positive standpoint, because it's still an incredibly good, positive movie. So to get that out of the way, get fucking ready, because I'm going to talk some shit. So
I'm strapped in.
That's it. So The Omen was released in 1976, a long bloody time. Finally, a film before I was born. It's directed. Yeah, that's it. It's a film directed by Richard Donner. If that name sounds familiar, he's also the director of Superman, Lethal Weapon, and of course, The Goonies. One of the greatest movies of all time. Films that are completely different to The Omen. I mean, they're all pretty light-hearted. I mean, Lethal Weapon has got some dark moments, but it's mostly, pretty tongue-in-cheek, light-hearted comedy. Nothing like The Omen. The Omen's dark.
Really dark. Really, really dark.
And I'm looking forward to getting into that side of it, because that's what I do love about this movie. So the film starring Gregory Peck, Harvey Spencer Stevens. So that, I believe, is the little kid that plays Damien. Lee Remick, David Warner, and loads more. Basically, there's a load of people in this one, but the main cast really are those. It sits at IMDb 7.5 and 85% on Rotten Tomatoes. So as we all know, 7.5 means essentially a masterpiece on IMDb.
Really?
Pretty much. Well, pretty much. I always say, if you get anything that's like 6 or 6.5 more, then they're movies that everyone sort of has to see, because they're what I consider movies that are very, very good, or masterpieces, because everybody just wants to shit on movies, especially if it's IMDb. Rotten Tomatoes just gets whatever the fuck it wants.
Yeah, that is true. That is true.
So Google synopsis wise, Robert, a married man, already sounds adulterous, but that's nothing to do with this
He's
movie.
not,
But Robert,
though.
no, it's not at all. A married man agrees to switch his wife's. See, this is what I'm saying. It sounds weird. It agrees to switch his wife's stillborn baby with an orphaned infant. But as the child grows, a sinister series of events start taking place. That's a shit synopsis, as usual. Well done, Google. You fucked it up. You didn't really tell anybody. It sounds more like a sexy affair movie with Michael Douglas.
It makes him sound awful.
It does make poor Gregory Peck sound like a fucking pervert.
It really is not.
So Google got that wrong. But, you know, we're getting to what the film is really about. One of the questions I always like to ask my guests is, if you can remember, when did you first see this movie?
Oh wow. It wasn't that long ago. I am notoriously known throughout the Nerdy Up North community for not watching a lot of movies. I have a set playlist and I kind of stuck with that. But a few years ago, I decided to have a horror history lesson. The horrors that I'd not seen and I really wanted to. And this, along with the likes of Rosemary's Baby, came up in the playlist. And it was probably a few years ago, and I have watched it, I would dare say, every other month from then onwards. It has become one of my wheelhouses, one of my favourites. It's up there. It really is up there. So yeah, it was only a few years ago.
Really? That's cool. I mean, I love it when people, you know, are on this journey through horror, and then there's movies like The Omen that are obviously considered, you know, absolute classics. Yeah. And people hadn't seen them, and then when they come across them, I like the fact that the impact that they can have on people is still there. Like, it's a movie that you saw not necessarily that long ago, but it still is a horror that you relate to in a modern day, so to speak, so much that you're like, this is now one of my favorites. That's the how important and how incredible horror is, and the iconography of horror, that if you get a movie right, it's timeless. And that's what's cool about The Omen, is the fact that you did that. With me, the Omen is one of the movies that and I've spoken about this many a times, but I used to just buy or rent or anything I could movies constantly, you know, especially horror and stuff. And this was one of the movies that I watched in my sort of later teens. So actually, in regards to me watching a lot of horror, because I started so young, this I think I watched this when I was around 15 or 16.
Did you understand?
And quite honestly, yeah. Well, quite honestly, I thought it was all right, and that's what I thought about it. And then I remember watching it a little bit later on, and then completely forgot that I did watch it. Then a couple of years ago, I rewatched it because they finally put it on. I think it was Disney randomly.
But, of all places,
of all places, where you put an incredibly dark 70s horror, you put it on Disney. But I watched it on there a couple of years ago, and then this week in prep, I've watched it twice, and I've also rewatched because over the time I've watched them, but I've rewatched all the Omen movies apart from the shitty remake in the early 2000s. And
it's literally word for word. It's literally scene for scene, word for word. It's
it's one of those piece of shit ones.
Yeah,
where they're like, "Oh, The Omen is such a classic. Let's just remake it and waste our money on it like you need to." Well done, Hollywood. And then I watched the first Omen, which is the new one, also available now on Disney. Not a sponsor, but they can give me that Disney money if they fucking want.
Oh yeah,
that would be nice. Yeah, but yeah, first Omen, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. But yeah, so that was, so in regards to me watching horror and starting so young, The Omen was a film that one, I watched, as I said, when I was around 15 or 16, and two, I couldn't really necessarily connect with, which is surprising because it should be the type of movie that I won't shut up about. So I'm really excited about talking about things like that a little bit later on. So where to start with this movie? This is the interesting start, and this is how I always find the interesting way to start these podcasts. Now is where do we start with this movie? Now, I would probably say, for me, I would start with the characters. And I do this quite a lot because I think characters within the movie obviously are one of the biggest points because they're the people that you're on this journey with. You're following their journey, good or bad. And in this movie, it's not a good journey that you're following on, but it's an
No,
interesting one.
it's like it's very bittersweet, the journey that you're on, because initially at the beginning you have, I mean, if we take Gregory Peck, because he is the main, protagonist throughout this movie, he is sitting in a delivery waiting room thinking his whole life is about to change.
Yeah,
His son is coming into the world, and to be told that that's not gonna happen after, the fact that unfortunately his baby son passed away. And then he gets this kind of like beacon of hope. Now, we don't know at the time, as the audience, as to what kind of beacon of hope he's just been offered.
the beacon of the devil's son.
Yeah. And and then the life that they portray as Damien's growing up doesn't seem bad.
No,
it doesn't seem terrible.
Like, there's so much light at the start of this movie that is already sort of shrouded in a form of darkness, but you don't see that darkness at the start of the movie.
Yeah, but it's just his darkness because he's hid everything from his wife. His wife doesn't have to go through the pain of knowing that her son died. This little boy who he believes mother has just died doesn't have to go through that pain. He's kind of in his way. It's his darkness to carry, but at the same time, it's quite a light to somebody else.
Yeah, you're right. There's a lot to this movie that is on the borderline of, and also there's a lot of moralistic aspects to this film as well. Where there's so many like, is this right? Is this wrong? It's normally 95% wrong. But with the characters, like you were saying,
but you don't look at that thing, though, do you?
No, that's it. But when you so like you said, like at the start of the movie, Gregory Peck, we find out that they've had a child, but unfortunately the child has died. The wife doesn't know, but then also at the same time, another person has had a child who obviously ends up being the spawn of Satan. That they don't know, obviously. But ends coincidence. But obviously at this point, no one really knows, and they take on this child and obviously raise it as their own, as if it was their son. Now, Gregory Peck, this is where it gets difficult for me, because this is where I have to try and be careful that I'm not shitting on the movie and so on. So there's a lot of characters within this movie, and there's things that I want to talk about later, so I'm not going to go into it too much. It's so difficult to try and navigate. But Gregory Peck, he's basically the dad. You've got the mum of the Damien that's not even their child, and essentially that's what the movie is that you're on this journey with them as the characters going through this movie. You then start finding out more about the fact that the priest turns up and is basically saying that your son is the son of the devil. And he's a nasty little shit. You need to get rid of him. And they're essentially saying you gotta basically kill your own son, even though it's not their son. But still, you don't want to hear that sort of shit. You don't want to be told that your son is the devil, whether they are or not. And that's essentially where the film takes us on this journey to uncover the truth, so to speak, the mystery of what it is. You've got a dad, or he is the dad really of this child, who's essentially on this journey to prove it wrong that he's not. But along the way, and every step of the way, it's proven that he is the son of Satan. And then all the dark stuff that goes on within it as well. But there's a lot of characters in this. As I said, you've got Gregory Peck, who's obviously the husband. You've got his wife, and they're quite clearly a couple. They love each other. They were having this child, and obviously there's this dark secret that she doesn't know. Along the way, as I said, you've got the priest. You've got a crazy babysitter, whatever she is that comes along.
She's a nanny.
She's a
Mrs.
nanny. That's
Baylock.
right. And do you know what? I would have. I'm going to get into this now. I would have fucking sacked her and got her out my house immediately with all the fucking sass that she's got, because
She was
they're
nasty.
they're paying her, they're bloody
Hmm.
paying her, and yet she's the one constantly being like, Damien, it doesn't want to do this today. Well, no, hang on a minute. I'm telling you what to do.
Yeah, I love that back and forth on the stairs between Leah, gosh, what's her name, Catherine Thorne and Mrs. Baylock, where she's like, no, my son, my rules, I don't care. I mean, she was proven right that Damien did not want to be there, but at the
Yeah,
time, that wasn't the point. That was her son. He was getting
no.
down them stairs and getting in that car. Yeah, it was. I think the whole dog thing for me would have been the straw that broke
Well,
the
that's the
camel's
other thing,
back.
because obviously, as the audience, we know that the nanny is there essentially to protect Damien because
Yeah.
she is in on it. She knows that he's the devil's
Oh
child.
yeah, she's there
Um,
to she's there from the church. She wants to navigate the powers that there's already starting to come out after the whole incident with the other nanny who
yeah,
did the thing. So
yeah,
yeah,
did the thing,
she
yeah.
did the thing. She wants to navigate Damien into what the church essentially want from him, because Damien's story is one big, massive conspiracy by the church, which goes into a hell of a lot more detail on the first Omen. Little bit of law change, but that's okay. But and the original was that the church wanted to create the Antichrist to basically drive the people back to church to basically go, haha, we told you so. You know, devil's real. Come on, come to the church.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's what they wanted to do essentially. And Mrs. Baylock is there to make sure that happens.
Yeah, make sure all the plans go ahead,
Yeah,
and then, like you said as well, the other thing that would have made me kick her out straight away is inviting a dog into the house. Now, I love dogs,
I love dogs.
but at the same time, this is my house. Stop trying
Yeah,
to bring fucking shit into it. So anyway, so this film would have been over in like half an hour if I'd have been there, because I would have been like, get out, stop trying to tell me
get out
what
the
to
door.
do. But she's there, and basically she's a nasty motherfucker,
She is.
as it comes to fruition throughout the movie. You have David Warner. David Warner. So this is David Warner before
Wow.
he created Tokar and Razor from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: Secret of the Ooze. Before he was was
Fuck yeah.
mutating a wolf and a snapping turtle. He was in this as a photographer. He knows that his days at some point with this in this movie is numbered, because he's taking photos, and all the photos he's taking seem to depict essentially the deaths. It's like Final
Hmm.
Destination before Final Destination,
Yeah.
um, and it's essentially depicting the things that are going to happen to these people, and then he realizes that he's in one of these photos. He's gonna meet his demise somehow, which he does within the movie, which we talk about as
Yeah.
well, because the darkness that are in this movie is something that I definitely want to talk about.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, there's a lot of characters in this movie, but the thing with this, the thing with this movie
Go on, just say
is that
it.
is that the characters in this movie are good. I like the characters in this movie. The
Mm.
difficulty that I have, and I'm I'm trying not to spoil my big reveal of how I feel until the end.
Okay. Okay.
Did you know what? Fuck it. We're going to move on. That's the
Oh.
characters. This is the shit that happens in the
Okay.
movie. And that's where it is. That's where it goes. One thing I will say about the
Mhm.
casting is that the kid that plays Damien, Harvey Spencer Stevens, he's fantastic, because he genuinely looks like the devil child, but not in a horrible way. It's just
No.
even as a child actor, like it's just the facial expressions he's pulling. You know, he hardly talks within the movie, but these
No.
facial expressions, you know, whether it's the end scene of the movie or throughout the movie, he does a really good job, or they do a really good job at capturing. There's something more behind those eyes, you know,
Yeah.
not a sweet innocent kid. They managed
Nope.
to shoot the movie to show that there is something off about this kid, and they do a really
Hmm.
good job with that.
They do. He was actually cast because out of all of the kids in the casting room, when Richard Donner said, "Attack me," he was the only one who did.
Oh, really? Well, maybe he's the fucking devil
he is the
child.
only one who went for him, and Richard Donner went, "That's our kid," and
That's the one.
that's the one. And the most brilliant part about it is he doesn't have much dialogue. He very rarely says anything, and you are right, it's all in the face. But what gets me and got me when I was reading up about this movie, and this was well before today, the end scene, the smile, all improvised. Nobody told him to do it.
Which is mad as well, because
It's crazy.
it's so good, that bit, because it's it's not just like, it doesn't, the thing is we know what kid actors can be like. They can be really shit, they can be really cheesy, they can
They
like
can be the kid from the
completely take you out of
Babadook.
it. Yeah, that's it. But what's so good, like, and like at the end scene as well, is that there's something very natural about it. Now, I don't necessarily know if that's a good thing for the child or for his parents in real life, but there's something very natural about how evil this kid sort of looks or behaves and stuff. So even though I'm going to say stuff about the performances probably a little bit later that people might not agree with, I think that they did a fantastic job with him. And I also love the fact that almost every scene he's in, not every scene, but the majority of scenes he's in, there's some essence of fire around him as well. Which is really cool. Is that there's always, the burning flames of hell surrounding him at some point. And I like that thing. Like, it's a cool technical filmmaking part of storytelling, where they're trying to tell a story and it becomes like an aesthetic thing, a technical point where, like, well, if he's going to be the devil's child, let's just have some fire fucking going mental in the background somewhere.
That is so true, because when he meets Mrs. Baylock for the first time, he's lying in front of a fire, and that's the only light that he has is the firelight. So wow, I know, like, okay, that's cool. I never even put two and two together there.
That's it. Just the fires of hell are always around him somehow. If it's not the fires from hell, it's a motherfucker of a nanny or a massive big fucking dog that's going to chew the shit out of you.
That dog is adorable, though. They did say in the when they were filming that dog just was so cute. Like, that dog did not do what it was meant to do.
It's running around trying to like lick everyone, and they're like, no, it's supposed to be like evil as fuck, really, to be honest.
Exactly.
Stop licking everyone.
There's one character who I've never been interested in before, and his death scene is amazing. Is Father Brennan, and it's not
right. Okay.
I don't know why. I don't find him as interesting as David Warner's character and him and Gregory Peck figuring it out, and like I don't really. He never really bothered us that he was there until I watched the first Omen, and I've totally changed my mind on that character. It makes
because
watching the first Omen to then the Omen, it makes so much sense, sense. So
the connections there, and it makes you sort of understand the character more and so on.
Yeah, and he does have one of the greatest lines in the movie.
Which one? I can never bloody remember. Go on, tell me.
When the Jews return to Zion, and the comet rips the sky, and the Holy Roman Empire rises, then you and I must die.
Yeah, it's nice.
There is actually more to it, but I'm not going to bore you with
There's
the rest of it.
There's more to it. Yeah, I remember that in the movie now, because that's when he's on the bench, in it, I think, or wherever, or somewhere like that. And then there's the bloody tornado that just turns up, and just out of the blue. Do you know what? That's one of the scenes that I struggle with, because I'm like, aesthetically, it looks cool, but also it don't make any sense. And there's no one else around whatsoever. It's just him. Like, nobody in the background's going, it's a little bit fucking windy.
Where did that come from?
Or just some bloke going over a railing or something like that into the sea. But which I'd love to see. But it was just him, and then obviously he meets his demise. But I was talking about the demise. I suppose that's a good way to segue into the darkness of this movie. Because this is what makes it become one of the 70s style horror movies. And that is the darkness. Not just in regards to tone, in regards to what happens, but in regards to, it is unapologetic in what the images are showing you on screen. For example, one of the first, or if not the first, if I can't remember, is somebody who's his original nanny, who hangs herself, and it's such an impactful scene because before that point nothing really massively had sort of happened, but when that happens,
children's party.
yes, at a children's party,
it's a children's party. Nobody should have to witness that, and it's obviously the most. It's probably the most famous line from the movie is "It's all for you,
Damien. It's all for you."
Watch me jump.
And then she's so happy about it. She's so bloody happy about it, and then she jumps off.
But that's the starting point. That's when the power is because that's where the influence of him is starting to appeal and to what's the word I'm looking for? What's the word I'm looking for? Oh gosh, my brain's just gone too much. Yeah, influence is starting to influence people, and his nanny obviously being the closest one to him. So that's the starting point of Damien's power.
Yeah, and that's when you start. Yeah, that's when the story sort of starts taking you on that mystery of like, okay, well, what is this? Like, I've got to try and understand this and the characters within the movie. Yeah, that's it. Imprint.
That's what I was trying to say. Imprint.
That's it. But we're trying to understand it as the viewer. They're trying to understand it on the screen throughout the movie, the characters. But yeah, like I said, that's the darkness, and we got this throughout the 70s, and this is why I truly love 70s horror, and I always say this. I always believe that 70s horror are movies that are the definition of what horror or the horror genre stands for, because these movies that we got predominantly, or a lot of them are different, but they are, especially if you're talking about films like this or The Exorcist or the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the way that they're depicting horror on a visceral and a violent nature, and the images that you see on screen are images that shock you. That's what I mean when I'm talking about that form of iconography. And the Omen, I nearly said the Omen, I don't even know what that is.
The Omen, I like that.
It's like a cross between Damien and Omen. That's going to be the next one. They're going to call it the Omen.
Omen.
Either that or it'll be an omelette or something. I don't know. But but that's the thing that I like about this movie, because it isn't afraid to do what a lot of films in the 70s did in horror, which was go that extra step to almost shock you, but not shock you to the point where you're like, well, that's stupid, or oh, they've just done this to shove it in. It all works within the structure and the constraint of the movie. So like, you know, so you've got like the lady that does that and kills herself. You've also got the priest, the father that dies in the random tornado, who ends up getting the thing that comes off the church into him. Then we've also got David Warner, who meets his demise in a super cool way, where he gets his head cut off by a pane of glass, I think it is, or something like that. Anyway,
it's a sheet of glass that comes off the back of a lorry and just takes his head clean off. And I love the fact that David Warner kept that head.
Didn't keep the head?
Yeah, that was his head, and he was keeping his head.
It's just like, I can imagine him like walking off with it at the set at the end of the day, like, bye everyone, and everybody just like, everybody's walking off with their, like, you know, their empty Tupperware and everything like that, and he's just like, no, this is my head. See you later, everyone.
That's mine. He said in the divorce when he divorced his wife, he was taking that head. I love David Warner. I love his death scene. But you are so right when it comes to 70s horror. They really took take Texas Chainsaw out of the equation, but they really took a direct hit when it came to religious movies. Now, The Exorcist is one of my favorite my favorite film of all time. That and Ghostbusters, and because of that, I have such a fascination with either religious tones or a complete religious film. Like, I think there's something so special that can be done with religious stories, and this is one of them. There was a point I was going to make to this, and I'm getting so excited about the fact that you brought up 70s history, because I absolutely adore 70s movies. I went through a whole
Exorcist
phase.
is this? Do you prefer this to The Exorcist, or do you?
That's such a hard question to ask, because The Exorcist is right there. It is my favorite film of all time. Like, I adore that film. I know that film inside out, back to front. I think that is one of the most perfect, not just horror, perfect movies that has ever been made.
Yeah,
Ever.
absolutely.
Technically, aesthetically, the everything that goes with that movie, I think, is perfection.
Yeah, it ticks every box.
Every single box. So to try and compare these two for me would be really difficult because I have a lot of love for The Omen. I probably watch The Omen more than I do The Exorcist, but The Exorcist I watch every year on Halloween. I have done for I don't even know how long. I got married on Halloween and I watched it at midnight the night before I got married.
Yeah. The Exorcist is always in my Halloween 31 days of like horror. The Exorcist is always like a mainstay on that. But it's interesting. So controversial point number one from me is that I feel that this film was made essentially because they were trying to find the next Exorcist. That's how I feel about The Omen, because I feel that this was because The Exorcist was such a huge hit and it done so much that I feel that The Exorcist opened up the idea, the concept of bringing a horror aspect or a horror element to a religious undertone or a religious understanding and story.
Yeah.
So I feel that personally, the company, the studio, was looking for another Exorcist. That's how I feel with this movie when I watched it. Even when I watched it when I was like 15 or so, I was just like, this feels like it was trying to be like another Exorcist within the same tone. And I'm not necessarily saying that as in that's a bad thing.
No.
But I'm just saying that that's sort of how I feel about this movie. How I feel that this came obviously not, around the same sort of time as The Exorcist.
73, The Exorcist came out.
Yeah, not long after. And I feel like this is the typical sort of studio thing where they like, okay, let's try and find our next thing of that was so successful. That's how I feel about The Omen. But once again, that doesn't mean that I'm like saying because it did that, it's it. Just that's because it's not. And that's what I'm going to keep saying throughout this. I do not think this movie is shit.
No, let's put a disclaimer out right now. He does not think this movie is shit.
No, I've just got a lot of opinions.
And that's totally fine, and we're here for them. Everyone can have an opinion.
Yeah.
But Rosemary's Baby comes out in 1968. That's kind of like the beginning of the religious outbreak of horror. So you've kind of, and The Exorcist then follows that, and then The Omen follows that. And I don't feel like it's a case of, and this is just me personally, I don't feel like it's a case of studios going, oh, well, we have to one up that. I just think that's where horror was at the time. Look at horror as the 70s being all about religious undertones, overtones, or full on,
like
just fully fledged
horror, all that sort of stuff.
Then you go into the 80s. It's the decade of slasher. It's the decade of the slasher movie. And then you go into the 90s, and that's the revitalization of horror. It's where it all gets redone. Everything's thrown out the window and we start again. And now we're going back into the religious side of it because, like, obviously the first Omens come out. There's been a few.
Every film, yeah.
Yeah. So I just feel like it's just a wheelhouse of just, we're in this place now. We're just going to stick with this. And then it'll fade out and we'll just get sick of it. And then we'll move into something else. That's how I look at the history of horror. When it comes from, like,
you're right. Yeah. The history of horror is all about repetition until we get sick of it, like you're saying.
Exactly.
It's like in the early 2000s, all we did was getting remakes and reboots, and they kept going and kept going until we got sick of them, and then the next thing would come out that would revitalize horror. Like, obviously, in the 90s, horror wasn't doing great, and then as soon as 96 came around, we had Scream. That reinvented the horror genre. Then we got so many movies like Scream. Then everybody got a bit pissed off by them. So then, 1999, we had the Blair Witch Project, and that restarted that. But then we got 1,000 fucking horror movies that were handheld horrors, and then it moves into the next thing. So you're right. It does continuously do that thing.
Yeah, and the wheel will come back again. It'll come back around again. Horror doesn't learn its lesson. It just
That's
keeps
it.
on going.
But I
But
do
you do get some
think that
gems that come out of it.
you do get some gems, yeah, absolutely. Well, that's the thing. Every now and again, you get some absolutely gems in horror that, like, I mean, you have to have them because they're the things that keep
Mhm.
revitalizing the genre and keep saving cinema essentially by making money because that's what horror
Yeah,
does. It saves cinema, even though cinema doesn't give a shit about horror. It's still there to save the money and
I
save their
know.
money and doing it. But we all know that as horror fans and horror community, we all know horror gets fucked over. But what I like about, and I think to the credit of this movie, is that it does what a lot of 70s movies does, which is it doesn't shy away of the darker moments of what
Mm-mm.
realistic film, like it's trying to depict a dark nature to the realism of life in trying to not make it in like an over top way. It's
Mhm.
just the realistic tones of this is what it could be if we were in these situations. Like I said before, Texas Chainsaw Massacre to me is the definition of horror. That's as far as I'm concerned, that's what it is.
I do
Um,
love that film. I have a
absolutely.
lot of
But to
love.
me, that is the absolute pinnacle of definition of horror because of what we see on screen and how it's portrayed. But we got that so much in the 70s. So I do believe that The Omen has its place within
Mhm.
that iconography of 70s horror because of it followed suit of continuing the darkness throughout not just the stories but the characters and what was being depicted on the screen.
Yeah, and you
um
get
yeah,
real life darkness as well. Gregory Peck was on the verge of retiring. He wasn't getting any studio call on him. He was down and out, and he'd not long lost his son. His son had passed away, not in the best circumstances, and Gregory Peck was going through a lot. That happens. His career is kind of like dwindling, and then he gets this put onto his lap, and for some reason, just something just spoke to him, and
he
it was,
connected with it, yeah.
yeah, massively, and it was his way of being able to control his grief. He got it all out throughout this movie, and it set him up. It's put him into like Gregory Peck is such an amazing actor. Once Flew Over the Cuckoo. No, that's Jack Nicholson. Sam. To Kill a Mockingbird.
Yeah, that's
Sorry.
right, yeah.
Wow, that was terrible.
Well, I don't
um,
edit it, so you're stuck with it, sorry.
Oh no, it's okay. It's okay. I did an interview with an actor recently, and I made a complete fool of myself on that by giving him a wrong
Oh no.
character. So yeah,
Oh no.
I'm used to it by now.
It happens, it happens.
It does. But yeah, Gregory Peck is like he was a master of his class, and then it kind of like dwindles, and then he goes into this whole new genre of horror, and he becomes like he's an icon in my eyes. For me, that man is an icon.
So now I'm gonna feel bad because later on I'm gonna say some things that are gonna make me look like a fucking bastard.
It's
So
fine.
we get to that.
As I
This
say
is
on,
gonna be one
go
of
on.
this is definitely gonna be the one of the most controversial sort of episodes I've done in
Well,
regards to my opinions.
it's a controversial movie.
Yes, well, that's
It's a
you're right.
religious movie. It's a
Yeah,
controversial
it's a
movie.
controversial movie, and the funny thing is that side of it isn't what I find controversial. Like people would find the controversy of the dark elements and the murder, like the deaths and stuff. Like I don't find that controversial. I'm like I commend it for that because of what it did and because it's part of the horror genre.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but there's a lot of things that I will talk about when we get to sort of how we feel about the movie in total.
Mm-hmm.
One thing, so one of the other things that I talk about a lot because to me, is outside of all this, like I say all the time, filmmaking is incredibly important to me, and that's one of the standouts of this movie because it has the beautiful 70s aesthetics and cinematography that I am always in awe of when I watch it because when we had movies in the 70s, um, people really understood filmmaking. And what they understood about it is that films worked best when you showed everything.
Mm.
And this is another example, and so many other things like Jaws and so many other movies. where showing everything is actually scarier than showing very little of something, and that's how I feel. So in the 70s and in this movie, what you had is you had a lot of wide angle lenses that showed
Yeah.
you everything, and what that means is that it opens you up to being able to tell the story, being able to tell something that's happening with the characters, but also incredible looking shots, incredible cinematography. And The Omen is definitely an example of 70s horror where this movie looks so good. And Richard Donner really knows how to tell a story through the
Oh
camera. And
yeah.
he also shows that in, Superman, Lethal Weapon, the Goonies and everything.
The
He always makes these movies
Goonies.
that are visually stunning. But this film as well, I feel that he really nailed the aesthetic tone and the look for a movie that this needs to be. And he didn't go back and
100%.
forth between, like, he's a director that knows you only need close-ups when you need them to depict something
Yeah.
that's happening to a character. Like, there's close-ups in this movie if somebody's scared or crying, then you have the close-ups because then it makes you feel more in tune with their emotion. But when it's coming up to the church and you want to see this big shot of this big church and everything that's going on, or when the father of the priest is in this tornado thing, but it's showing you everything and it's showing the scope and the scale of everything. We don't really get that much anymore. And I feel like that's almost like a forgotten trait of cinematography. And like Halloween is another prime example. One of the most beautiful films of all time for me personally is Halloween, the first Halloween. The Omen that's one of the other things I commend it for, is because I love how this movie looks. It looks great.
The Richard, for an American to be able to make a movie look English is a feat in itself.
There's something very Hammer horror about this movie still.
Oh, that is such a. I was thinking Wicker Man. Like when I look at it, I instantly get Wicker Man vibes. But you are totally right. It is so Hammer horror that and that's an American doing that.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
You totally get the aesthetic correct. That looks English. That is an English countryside. That is an English home, and that is not on a soundstage in America with American eyes. That it's just. I absolutely adore that. What I also adore is the score. Jerry Goldsmith's score that runs all the way through it. It's so 70s that it's perfect. Because there's some parts of it, it's beautiful. But like when they're walking through walking through the park, you are meant to be relaxed. So I can totally understand where the score is coming from. But it's very much, oh, what is that? But for a 70s movie, it fits so well. And we have a thing where we talk about horror not doing very well in Oscars, and they don't recognize it. Jerry Goldsmith up for an Oscar for his score in The Omen, and he went, I'm out of here. I'm not winning this. I've never won one before. I'm leaving. Richard Donner said, no, you stay. You're going to win this. And he went, no. And he went outside for a cigarette, and he won.
There we go. He had to run back in. He's like, shit.
Yeah, he won, and it's the only Oscar he ever won was for The Omen. The score for that movie. Oh yeah, and the opening music with the I'm not even going to try and do it, but the choir singing that is kind of like anytime Damien is kind of mentioned, it starts playing. It's perfect though.
The satanic
gives me chills.
Sort of choir, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah, if I couldn't hear myself a lot in my headphones, I'd start singing it, but then I'd have to hear back how I sound.
That's it. But yeah, you're right. The music is like a highlight of the movie, and it is very 70s. And also, like, you're right. I know what you're saying. Where it goes places that are very strange for the moment that it's in, and sometimes it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it kind of feels like it doesn't fit, but it does at the same time.
Yeah,
it's so heightened that I think we're so used to, because for me a score directs me on how I should be feeling at that point. And with The Omen, it's so heightened and dramatic. It's so dramatic, like everything, even from the music where you are meant to be calm and like, okay, we're in a good place. You know, nothing bad's gonna happen. They're just walking through a park, and it's so up there. It kind of
Oh,
like,
hang on a
and
minute.
it
They've lost their fucking kickers, their shit parents.
really aren't the best.
That happens so much throughout this movie. That's one of the things I wrote down in my notes. They are very shit parents because because they literally like they're having this loving like husband and wife walk, so to speak, through the thing. Next minute they're like, "Where the fuck's Damien?" And
Where's the
then
kid?
this and then they're like trying to find him. And look, I've got a kid, I've got a daughter, and she's out of my sight. Like I don't even care if I'm walking with people. Most of the time, I'm not even listening to what they're saying because I'm just nodding and going yes or no because I'm trying to be like, where is she? I need to know where she is at every single second. They're like, fuck it, I don't give a shit. We're enjoying our walk.
Hey, it
And
was the 70s.
he could be in the lake right behind them, drowning,
Oh,
but they don't give a shit. But that happens a lot in the movie where they're incredibly bad parents.
they're not the best. Now, what we have to remember is that Gregory Peck's character, his name's forgotten, is Robert Thorne, is an ambassador to. He's an American ambassador living in England. And this is why he was picked by the church to take Damien on, because the way that they were going to, like I say, this movie is so religious, but yet there's a massive conspiracy theory at the same time, because the conspiracy is to get Damien into a political place, and that's where the uprising of the Antichrist will be. And then that's where the church can come in and go, wait a minute, we're here, come and join us. That's all it was. It was just,
I assume that puts him in a position of power, in a position of influence to be able to
and then the church can come in and save the day. That was the whole point. And then everyone in the church can then turn around and go, told you so. Told you so. Told you it was real. Told you we could help you. And that's all they wanted to do. They used it as a driving force to get people back to church. I mean,
if anybody wants to see where that goes, they just watch the second and third one, and then they find out.
Oh, crikey! I can't even. Oh, I can't even with them movies. I can't. I'm not. So I actually
like the third one. I don't like the second one. The second one is jank. It is so fucking boring, and you learn more about the Thorne Company than you do about what the fuck is going on.
Exactly.
But it's so boring. But the third one, I actually like. Like Sam Neill does a good job, and I like how they don't. What I suppose even with the second one away as well. Like what I like about it is that they don't shy away. Like there's never really moments where Damien is a character throughout the franchise, or there's 3 films or whatever he's in, that he's almost fighting against what he is. Like that doesn't happen.
That's the thing. Damien doesn't know what he is. Hasn't got a clue.
And then when you get to the second one, he knows. And then by the time you get to the third one, he's like,
he knows.
I want Armageddon, and I'm trying to cause the apocalypse. And everybody fucking knows that I'm the devil's, like I'm the devil's son.
On the third one, he holds no punches.
I enjoy the third one. Yeah, but I actually enjoy it, the third one. And I did start umming and ahhing as to whether, like, how much I like it and whether I like it more than this one. But I still don't know. And that's, my brain doesn't work sometimes.
The minute Damien starts to recognise who he actually is when his downfall comes into play. Because he can't. It's when he doesn't know, he kind of holds all the power. He has it all, but he has other people there to guide him. So all he has to do is just be him. He doesn't have to think about things. He just has to just go around his life as he always has done. But when he finally knows who he is, then he starts being Billy Big Bollocks about it, and starts throwing his weight about, and that's his downfall, isn't it? So he's the Antichrist, and then you've got the I can't remember what the other character's called. The one who goes against him. It's been a while since I've seen it.
Ending of the third one is utter shit. Like the ending of the third is rubbish. If anybody out there, I'm not going to spoil it. But when you watch it, or if you have watched it, you know that it's shit.
It's on Disney Plus.
Yeah, exactly. They're all on Disney Plus. As I said, including the newest.
Oh,
They need
I
to
watched
fucking
that today.
sponsor me with all this shit, I tell you. But the last thing I want to ask you about in regards to
Yeah.
like a general conversation,
Mm-hmm.
because we got to go into everything else yet. I don't fucking get the ending. Now, I don't mean like when
Okay.
Damien's all like, "Oh, hit Mr. President" and all that sort of shit. I
Yeah.
don't understand why they get an American burial because they're not. Because I didn't think they were American. They sound English, unless I'm
They
wrong. I
they
didn't
are.
think that they were American.
He's an American diplomat, so he would get an American funeral. He
See, that's where I'm going wrong.
Gregory Peck has that unique the Cary Grant voice of
Because he sounds English to me.
yeah, and I don't think he is, but he does very much sound it. But he
Yeah.
is classed as American diplomat, so that's why you would
Right,
get an American
okay.
burial,
Yeah.
and that's why the president of the United States would be there.
Yeah, which
And
is
it's
also
such,
fucking, it's mental. Like, I feel like that ending is like a setup to just say, like, if they don't do another one, it's now to say everybody's fucked because Damien's with the president. Like,
but how amazing
that's
would
how it
that be,
feels.
though? But that's amazing. So he's standing there holding hands with the president, and it looks like, oh shit, Damien's going to infiltrate the White House. Oh no, wait a minute, we got Omen 2, and he goes with his
Goes
brother.
to an all
He
boys
goes with his
school.
yeah. So he
That's it.
doesn't. But if you just
Yeah.
left it at that for the rest of our lives, we would have just thought Damien took over. He won.
Yeah, that's it. Like Damien, like he grew up and everything went to shit. But yeah, that's why I wanted to clear it up for me because for the whole movie and for years, I'd never liked the ending purely because I honestly thought that the husband and wife, like Gregory Peck and I think it's Lee Remick, her name. I could be
Lee
wrong,
Remick,
but
yeah.
I genuinely thought that they were English, and I was just like, why the fuck are they getting an American burial? Because they're not, they're English. But if they're American, then that makes sense.
Well,
It's
they're
obviously
American
just me.
diplomats, so I
Okay.
I kind of don't know what that means in respect to where they come from. Do they just work for Americans? But because of the fact that they were American ambassadors, then they would essentially get an American funeral. Yeah, I never really thought of that. I was just more thinking,
or if you're me, you just think that it was a good ending because you mean that everybody's fucked.
no, but that's how I saw it. I was like, get in, Damien, you go, boy, you go get your White House.
That's it. So I always add some production info and some facts. For one, so for the scene where Catherine's car is attacked by baboons, the production initially tried to have the baboons attacked by placing food around the car after having the zoo staff members deliberately not feed the baboons the night before filming, whilst also placing a baby baboon in the back seat of the car with a zoo official. After it completely failed to earn the desired effect, the official swapped out the baby baboon for the alpha baboon, which got the baboons to attack the car. According to Richard Donner, Lee Remick's terror during the scene was authentic, which obviously is understandable because if you've got an absolute, at least 1 trillion baboons after you in that scene, with their asses as red as the fires of hell, then they're going to be after you.
It's going to cause a stir.
That would have been pretty terrifying.
I have a little fact that kind of links your Exorcist and Omen theory.
Oh, here we go. I knew I was right. Go on.
Yeah, I've just remembered. And I wrote this down because the fact that it was linked to The Exorcist. So you know in The Exorcist when it's very famous for William Friedrich, William Friedrich, am I saying that correctly? Yeah.
William Friedrich fried eggs.
Friedkin.
That's
Jeez. It. Sorry, I am coming off the back of being poorly. William Friedkin, yeah, he's known for his how dramatic he was during the production of this and how real to life he was when he threw what's her face through the Ellen Bernstein through the room and ended up breaking her back. Richard Donner was so taken by that method that he applied it to the Omen in Lee Remick's scene when she's hanging from the staircase. She's generally hanging. She's got nothing there supporting her. They wouldn't let her have a stunt double come in and do it. She had to do it. She had to fall.
Well, that sucks.
Yeah, it had to be authentic. Lucky nobody got hurt, unlike how
Yeah,
poor Ellen Bernstein broke her back. But yeah, there's your connection to The Exorcist and
there's
The
the
Omen.
connection.
Yeah.
There we go. I knew there was something. I knew there'd be something. Where are we? Because Harvey Stevens was so young. I assume that's the kid's name, isn't it? I think Richard Donner found that the best way to direct him was to provoke genuine reactions, which sort of leads into what you were saying there as well. For example, when Damien is angry at being taken to church, Donner got his peeved facial expression by shouting to Stevens off camera, "What are you looking at, you little bugger? I'll clobber you." What a nice guy, eh?
Wow.
Uh,
He definitely took some notes from Friedkin
yeah,
on the method
Friedkin
of to
and
get people to do
Stanley
things.
Kubrick. It's
Yeah,
the
Kubrick
Kubrick
was known for
Friedkin
that.
method of filmmaking. Abuse everyone, and
I
you'll
wonder
get the
if he
film that
was.
you want.
I wonder if he was like that on the Goonies. I bet he
I
wasn't.
imagine that. No, do you know what they absolutely loved him
Yeah,
on the
they
Goonies.
loved him.
I've seen so many behind the scenes of Goonies that they absolutely loved him, and he did a lot for them
Yeah,
to create like the fun on that set. I mean,
I can imagine.
yeah, I'm not talking about the Goonies. I'll be on forever. Richard Donner,
Please, I thought I was getting away from it.
Richard Donner frequently had to reshoot close-ups of. Oh, this one makes me laugh. Close-ups of Gregory Peck because the star objected to being seen with double chins.
Yeah, I read that.
And that made me laugh a lot. Unfortunately, on film, it's not really something you can avoid much unless you do what he did, which was wear turtlenecks all the fucking time.
All the time. Or you do what I do and position your camera in an awkward place so you get the best side of your face. And I will not move my camera from the position it's in because of that. So
That's
I
it. That's where it
understand where
stays.
I understand where Gregory Peck's coming from.
Either that, worst case scenario, just buy yourself a turtleneck.
Or there's that.
Oh, that get the Gregory Peck look. Damien was originally going to be called Domlin, which is mental, because the writer David Seltzer had a friend whose obnoxious child was called Domlin, but David Seltzer's wife convinced him to change the name. Luckily, because Damien works, Domlin doesn't fucking work.
But Damien comes from from English sounding demon, but Damien, in respect to the religious aspect, is not a. I think there's a Saint Damien, and as far as I'm aware, saints are good people. I could be wrong.
Apparently so.
So,
but maybe Damien's not. This Damien's not.
Well, this Damien wasn't. But Domlin?
Domlin's a weird name. I've never heard of anyone called Domlin. So
I'm gonna call my next cat Domlin.
Yeah, that's it, Domlin. That's a deep cut, isn't it? But there you go. There's some sort of facts. There's a few things of the movies. I always like shoving them in there. So now let's get into this. So I always ask my guests their thoughts really, but first, overall thoughts on the movie. Before I get into mine, I want to know yours.
Okay, so I genuinely have a lot of love for this movie. I love the placement that it has in horror history. I love the aesthetic. I love the story. I love the fact that it's a conspiracy story as well as a adventure story, because you just go on a little bit of adventure, go and get the knives in order to kill Damien. It's a story of family. It's a story of weird shit. There's a lot of weird shit going on. There's some great death scenes in it. I just have such a fascination with horror movies that have, religious tones in them, that this kind of spoke to me. So I feel like it came to me at the right time, and I have loved it ever since. So yeah,
I just said earlier, I do like the fact that it was a movie that came to you later on. Like it wasn't something that started you on your journey through horror. It was something that came later on your journey, and you still, that would have been cool. But you still connected. As I said, that's the power of horror. The power of Christ. Oh no, it's a different film.
Different movie. But if you want to go into that one,
but a better movie. But anyway, but it's. But I love the fact that horror still does that for people, and that's that's why I love talking about it, because like little knowing something like that brings me joy. Like it genuinely makes me happy on the inside, because horror is so influential to us as individuals, and we all seem to take things differently from it. Like very rarely do we all have the same opinions. Like, for example, we're going to have to say a different opinion on the Omen, which I'm going to go into. And I love that horror does that, but it's always still incredibly respectful, which is what's the most important thing.
The best thing about horror is having a conversation with another horror fan. You will walk away still being friends.
Yeah, absolutely.
You will always walk away. Like me and my co-host for Monsters, we have a lot of different opinions, especially the fact that I am a lover of old horror. And when I say old horror, I'm talking 1930s, 1920s actually, onto 1940s. I absolutely, and 50s. I absolutely love old horror. She's not that big of a fan of them, but we can still walk away at the end of the day with a smile on our faces. It's amazing, that, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I love that, and I love the fact that that's like what you did not that long ago with The Omen. That you took that much from it, and were like, yeah, I love this movie, even though it was a movie from '76 or whatever it was, and I love that.
It just speaks to us.
Yeah, exactly. Now, this is a film that didn't necessarily speak to me. So
That's okay.
as I said at the start, I think this is a very good movie, and I don't want people to think, because I don't give a shit. Like I don't give a shit what people think. But what I don't want people to do is what happens a lot when you jump onto the negative side of talking about something, and then immediately it becomes about, oh, this person doesn't like this movie, or this person doesn't appreciate this movie. I really appreciate this movie because it is part of that decade where genre was at its finest for me personally. You know, I love 80s horror, but the iconography of 70s horror on the depiction of every single aspect of what they're doing, whether that's filmmaking on a technical aspect, or whether that's story and how they portray that through, like, you know, what you see on screen, imagery or story, or through characters. That's what I love about 70s horror. It's so important to the genre, and it's so influential. This is part of it. The Omen is part of that, and I really do. And I've spoken about things that I like about this movie. I think the film works best when it is trying to solve the mystery of what Damien, or who Damien is, and whether we're watching a father who's trying to find it because he knows that there's something wrong there, or whether he's trying to find it for the reasons of he doesn't want it to be true because he wants a son and he wants his son. And that's what, you know, and that's the thing. And if you don't like a movie, you're not going to think about things like that. There's things that I love about it. And obviously I love the dark tone of this movie and the places it takes it. And I love the aesthetics of this movie. But if somebody says to me, do I believe that this movie stands up against The Exorcist, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Halloween, Dawn of the Dead, even Alien right at the end, obviously a different movie, but still part of that 70s horror of like 79, even Black Christmas, one of the earliest.
The original slasher.
Exactly. Do I hold this, for me personally, in high regards as them? No. And I think one of the reasons, and the way that I was trying to figure out all day of how I'm going to explain this, is when because this is going to be so weird. So I was saying this earlier on to my partner, that if you put like a heart monitor on me, right, and you've got this line, it's going like this and boop, like that. Now I'm not saying it's going to be a flat line as in I'm dead, but what I'm saying is that it's not going to be movement, because this film, for me, it doesn't give me what a lot of other movies of the 70s do, and it doesn't excite me. Like it doesn't. Yeah. When I finish watching this movie, I don't feel like I've watched something that has done anything other than just made me go along a line, like a heart monitor line, where my pace, my heart rate hasn't gone insane. Like if you put a heart rate monitor on me when watching The Exorcist, it's going to be fucking mental. But when you put me a heart monitor on me if I'm watching The Omen, it doesn't really do much for me. And I think it's because it doesn't, for me, it just stays along this line. And I think, to be honest with you, a lot of that is down to, like I was saying earlier, a lot of that is to do with performances. Because now, like you were saying earlier, now it makes me sound really, really bad. But Gregory Peck, that is his name, isn't he? He plays the main guy. I'm sure it is. Gregory Peck? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm going to feel bad saying this because of everything that you said earlier, but I don't like him in this.
Oh my god!
because I find. So you take Ellen Burstyn, I believe that's her name in The Exorcist. Yeah. She goes through that movie, but she is showing every form of emotion throughout that movie.
Oh my god, Ellen eats the scenery on the majority of it.
Yeah, like that's it. And that is what makes me as a viewer connect to the movie even more, because you feel like that you're going through what the character is going through more. What I don't get from Gregory Peck is I never feel like I'm on an emotional journey with this character. Oh, wow. I just feel like the movie itself in a way. I feel like I'm like this on a line the whole way through with Gregory Peck. I don't think that he gives a bad performance.
Yeah.
But I feel like this is the type of film that needed more of an emotional performance to give that more of an impact of the fact that we're talking about a child that's the spawn of Satan, who's his child that's not his child, so to speak. And he's trying to essentially, like you said earlier, go on this adventure to solve this mystery. And even in those moments, because he's not one of those actors, that's the thing. He's not one of those actors.
No.
So I think that is one of the big aspects of it, is the fact that he's not one of those actors. But I'm not saying I don't like his performance, and I'm not saying that I think that it hurts well, I think, do you know what? Fuck it. No, it does hurt the film. I think I think
just don't hold back.
No, I know this is why I feel so bad. I feel like as the lead in this movie, it didn't work.
Well, and I totally get what you mean. I just take it I see it in a completely different light. I see a man who is meant to be made of complete steel, and he is breaking from the inside from the very beginning, and he has to maintain that level of, kind of stiff upper lip kind of thing, because he knows, he's the only one who knows that boy is not his boy. Regardless that he's the Antichrist, that's not his child. His child died. And he is the only one who carries that burden and carries that grief, and it follows him from the very start to the very end when he's attempting to kill Damien. And I think I just, there's something so special about, and obviously Gregory Peck was going through grief himself at the time, so it kind of helps. But it for me, it was such a special performance. I mean, you could have had Dick Van Dyke playing him. Did you know that?
I would have fucking loved that. I would have loved that. That would have been the greatest movie of all time.
Said
just
it is
him going around chimmy-a-roo.
He said it was one of the biggest things. He was so disappointed. He should never have turned it down, and he turned down the role of Robert Horn.
If The Omen had Dick Van Dyke in it, we would be talking about the greatest movie that's ever been made.
We would have been talking about something.
Yeah, we would have been talking about hands down greatest movie ever made. That never happened. I'm sad about it now, to be honest. And as I said, I do feel really bad because I didn't know anything like that about Gregory Peck and about him dealing with real life trauma. Mm-hmm. So it does make me feel bad.
You don't have to feel bad. You have to take things how you see it and how you are in the moment. I see a completely different, and this is well before I knew anything about Gregory Peck's personal life. I just saw a man who had to carry the world on his shoulders, and he did it by himself. And he can't tell his wife what happened, because that will absolutely just he either does and destroys her, or carries it along himself and let it destroy him, and it does. It's his downfall.
Yeah, it's a good perspective to look at. I like it. I like it. I like having conversations like this because it makes you sort of see things slightly in a different aspect of it. I just I think it's just a movie that I just wanted more from. And once again, I don't mean that in a bad aspect, because there's so many, like, will I watch The Omen again? Yeah. And for the rest of my life, I will continue to watch The Omen, and I will enjoy every time I watch it. It's just, there are always going to be other movies from that time that I would much rather watch and I would enjoy more.
Yeah.
And I get more from than this movie.
And I totally get that, especially when you're going to size it up against The Exorcist. For me, that, like, nothing's going to win over that. And if you're setting that as your bar's really high. So I totally get where you're coming from and where it sits with you.
Absolutely. But talking about that, and now I've talked shit about the movie and the things that happen in it. Favourite scene in the movie? What's your favourite scene in the movie?
Favourite scene? Probably David Warner's death. The sheet of pain.
Okay, right, like at the end.
Yeah, probably.
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah. That's
the
cool.
sheet of pain through the neck is probably my favourite scene. I think it's beautifully shot. The fact that you get to see it a few times, and then his head comes off, and I always said this about The Omen. I love the fact it's not gory, but then everyone will always remind me of this scene, and I'm like, that's not gore.
No, it's like I've said a million times, that it's the depiction of violence and darkness at the level of what 70s did, and that's what I love about the 70s horror. Like I said, it never shied away from really showing you the escalation of violence that it did. Like I said before, like in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, or like in The Exorcist, and everything that happens to Regan, or Linda Blair and Ellen Burstyn and the priests and everything like that. Like, it was just like anything sort of goes, as long as it is aiding the movie itself and aiding the characters and aiding the story and where it's go. You know, it isn't, the movies that we got weren't like a lot of the movies that we get now that are for shock value and shock value alone. Everything that was meant to, that was there to shock you from the 70s and even in the 80s, it all served a purpose. Yeah. Whereas now, a lot of the time, it never serves a purpose. It's just to show as much blood and guts as possible.
Exactly.
Which is fine if people like that. No, and absolutely. And if people love that, you know, it's fine. And do you know what? I love that sometimes. I mean, look, I've watched A Sadness more times than I fucking should do. But, you know, that's a messed up movie. But this movie came out at a time and is one of those movies that there's always a reason for it depicting violence in the way that it did. And it never felt out of place. It just made you feel like you're falling in on yourself, that the terror and the dread and the tension that you felt within you was more apparent than it is when you're watching a film that's just like, oh, that's gross because it's just blood and guts. So like I said, this film's important. But yeah, your favourite scene is the David Warner's death. I do want to mention really quickly as well is how much I hate the end scene, not the burial thing, like the American funeral thing. I hate how it must have been the only shot they had, and they used it, of the slow-mo of the gun shooting Gregory Peck, because it looks fucking awful. Like, you can hardly see what's happening. They just obviously, you know, were trying to go for that slow-mo look. They obviously didn't have enough light in the shot, because you have to have so much light to shoot slow motion. Yeah. That they obviously didn't have enough, and it didn't look great. They should have taken it out of the movie and found a different way of ending that you know, of him dying.
He just needed to die. That was the end. That was the end result. And
yeah, exactly.
I personally don't think it should have been the policeman. I think it should have been Damien.
Yeah, or something, or at least somebody that had you know, a part to play within the movie.
A slip up.
That's who it should have.
Well, he's trying to kill him with multiple knives. Damien could have quite easily slipped a knife. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and got him. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, that would have been like, and also it would have been like more impactful to the movie, I suppose, as well, because it adds to the character of who Damien, as we know who he is. You know, so yeah, you're right. That should have happened. But I've just put my favourite scene in the movie is the graveyard scene. I think the reason that I love that scene is because it feels like it's a scene where you learn more than you do really in most of the movie. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you learn, you've got the whole graveyard and the tombstones of the, you know, of finding out that there's not a baby in, or like not a person in there, or not a baby in there. Oh no, we do see, like, you know, the baby one, the skeleton thing, but we don't see the adult or whatever it is. It's just like a dog or whatever it is. And then within that scene, it becomes like a chase scene with the dogs, with the hellhounds. That to me is about as exciting as the movie gets in regards to like up in the tempo.
Yeah.
But once again, that sounds like I'm being negative. I'm not. I'm
You
just saying, like,
know,
that to me is the standout of the movie, because you learn a lot within that scene, but also it's about the pressure that's on them to learn it and then get out, and then obviously, you know, it all goes tits up for them because they're getting eaten the shit out of by dogs.
No. Yep.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So there we go. That is the Omen. I almost said the Exorcist. That is the Omen. That is the Omen. That's how we feel about the movie. Obviously, you know, we have a difference in opinion, but like I said, and I do want to say to anybody that's watching this, if you are somebody that loves the Omen, I'm not saying that like you shouldn't. I'm not saying that what I'm saying is right. What I'm saying is that I think this is a fantastic movie. It belongs in the iconography of horror, like it should, with all these incredible movies of the 70s. But it just doesn't do for me what I honestly hoped that it would when I first watched it, and now still to this day, it never does. It just, as I said, it just goes along a straight line for me and never really goes above that straight line. Whereas other horrors like Halloween, Exorcist will just go up and down until I feel like I'm going to pass out.
Yeah.
I don't feel like I'm going to pass out watching this movie. That's how I sum up my movies now. If I
Oh,
don't feel like I'm going to pass out,
on a
doesn't do it.
level of 1 to passing out, how far are
Yeah,
you away?
yeah, exactly.
And I totally respect that. You know, I say this on my podcast each and every week. We can all agree to disagree. So, and I totally respect that. You have not shit on this at all. You have been nothing but polite.
Good. As long as it's respectful, and that's all that matters
Yeah.
to me. So one of the segments I have on the show is Your First Time, a segment that I absolutely love. I've done it since I first started the show. Blimey, November, it'll be 4 years. But I absolutely love it. And this is where you amazing people out there, whether you're horror fans or not, you send me over the first horror movie memory that you can remember, and then I always read it out on the show. So the first one that I've got is from the Excellent Day for a podcast. They are at Excellent Day for a. That's how you can find them. They're on Twix, which is, as I say, is a mixture of Twitter and X. So I call it Twix. They are four self-proclaimed horror nerds who love to discuss all things horror. And you can also find them at excellent for a day for a podcast.com. This is like a fucking promo for everyone.
That's horrible.
I remember very vividly having my buddy doll in the late 80s. He was like my best friend when I was a child until I saw the initial Child's Play. The initial Child's Play. That's how I should have read it. And that was the end of my buddy doll. He went out in the garbage. I told Fiona the story also. Her dad terrorized me as a kid. So he met Fiona Dorif, Brad Dourif's daughter, who's obviously part of that franchise now, and how her dad terrorized him, which would have been a cool moment. And yeah, I mean, you know, Child's Play is one of those movies that fucking gets everyone because of Chucky and how amazing Brad Dourif is. And then the next one that I've got is Your Move Creep podcast. You can find them at Your MC Podcast, once again from Twix, a podcast celebrating action cinema from 1980s to 2000, from the east to the west, from the worst to the best. They put, I first saw Poltergeist by accident. My dad had taped over my copy of the Jungle Book when I was 3 with Poltergeist. So part way through the bare necessities, it flicked to Come Into the Light, Caroline, and that huge demon thing came out. I always love to. Hang on, I'm going to go back to Come Into the Light, Caroline. I love that. I mean, Poltergeist is a classic. What a great character they. I mean, that's a fucking great movie. That is one that obviously I will cover on the show at some point.
I love Poltergeist. Carol Ann is actually my mum's name.
Oh,
So,
really?
yeah, so it's not just my mum's, it's my mother-in-law's as well. So they both get, oh, Caroline.
Caroline, yeah,
Oh,
see it coming to the
Caroline.
lad. But yeah, what a great movie. But yeah, I love reading these because we all get nostalgic.
That's fun.
I say
Oh,
this all
yeah.
the time. No matter what, whether it's something that started us on our journey through horror, whether it's something that stopped us, we watched a horror movie and never went back to it. We never forget it, and that's why I love this segment. I love getting them in. I
I
love
love
reading
it.
them, and I hope everybody loves them. But Sammie, can you remember your first horror memory?
Yes. Yes, I can. I had to relive it recently on Monsters. Because me and Dan did our firsts. And mine was a incredibly terrible. I want to call it a slasher movie, but I don't want to call it a slasher movie. It was Dolly Dearest. I was
Right.
eight.
Okay.
I was 8 years old, and I have a friend. I have a friend who was the friend who would get any movie, and her parents didn't give a shit. And she started my love affair with horror. She introduced me to some of the greatest horror movies, to The Mistress of the Dark. I would not know anything if it wasn't for my friend, who I am still friends with today. And yeah, she introduced me to Dolly Dearest. It's I rewatched it for Monsters, and I now I just couldn't understand how I was so scared of it, but it scared me. It scared me to the point that I did not own baby dolls or Barbie dolls growing up. They went in the bin. I slept at the foot of my parents' bed for I don't know how long, and I think it was when it eventually started to fade away that, oh, these dolls aren't going to come get me. Nothing's happened. I'm still here. What more can I watch? And that's where my journey of horror started, was when I was 8 years old with that
There we go.
movie.
So
And
you
I'm
went
so
from
ashamed that it's that movie.
yeah. We all want an amazing first horror
We
memory.
do, we do. And
Yeah,
that
it's
is just
called.
horrific.
It's I love the fact that it was a mixture of both, something that traumatized you, you didn't want it anymore,
Mm-mm.
but then understanding that it's just a movie and it can't
Hmm.
really hurt you,
Nothing
and
happened.
then you went back to it, and then you start your journey through that, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's just a great. I love talking about this, and I love talking about everybody's first time memories because, as I said, we don't forget our first time, good or bad. And it's something that we get very nostalgic about it, and I get really nostalgic talking to people about it. I get very nostalgic when I'm reading these out. So hopefully this is something that people like as well. So all you've got to do, if you want essentially this fucking free promo in an episode, then all you've got to do is head over to any of our social media pages, or if you're watching this on YouTube, you can just comment, send a message, direct message with as much detail like these ones as you can, and I'll add it into an episode. And we can just, the more I get, the bloody better. I've got a backlog of them. I've got a Word document of them all at the moment, ready to go into the episode, so I can keep adding to that. So
Awesome.
keep everybody bloody send them in. But Sammie, now is your time
Mm.
for promo.
Oh, God.
You need to now. You, as I said, you've got 1,000 shows.
Mm.
Now's your time to promote the absolute shit out of them.
Okay, so I'm going to do my stuff first. So I am the co-host of Nerdy Up North, which is a live show that we do every Sunday, where we are currently focusing on movie reviews. Our most recent episode is going to be Legend. I'm looking forward to that. I've never watched it before. But I also co-host a monster podcast, which is a dedicated horror podcast with my partner Dan from the amazing Bleeding Marvelous, where we look at Hollywood's most famous monsters, and that can be any form of monster. It doesn't have to typically be, your atypical monster. It could be some other monstrous feature that features within people. And then we've got, as part of the Nerdy Up North Nerdy Up North network, we have Trekking Up North for all you Trekkies. We've got Gaming Up North for all you gamers. We have a monthly podcast of women of pop culture or nerd culture. We also have a monthly feature of Gigs Up North, where Kirsty has been interviewing some amazing people within the music industry. I think that's it. We're available on YouTube. From anywhere that you get your podcast from, audio, we're everywhere. We're on Facebook, Instagram, all the social media platforms. All you got to do is just search Nerdy Up North.
There we go.
That's it.
See, I told
think that's it.
Like a zillion of them, and when you get off this, you'll be like, "Oh shit, there was like 10 more I need to remember."
I really hope I have not missed anything. But it's if YouTube has Nerdy Up, type in Nerdy Up North, we're there. Everything is there.
There we go. And like I say all the time, make sure that you do go and subscribe. Make sure that you go and support, whether it's watching everything that Sammie does or listening to everything that they do over at Nerdy Up North and Monsters Up North and the other zillion shows. Make sure you're rating and reviewing because it means a lot. And in regards to my show, in regards to Let's Talk Horror, the same. Please go rate and review. That means absolutely everything. If you leave 5-star reviews, which obviously, please do. Don't put anything less. Just do 5 stars. We only do 5 stars.
Just do 5. We're 5.
It's not hard.
5-star
It don't cost you anything, but it helps us. It helps us. As well as that, please subscribe. If you're watching this, please subscribe on the YouTube channel. If you're listening to us, as I said, rate and review it. Honestly, I love this journey I'm on. I know Sammie loves the journey that she's on. Without doing a podcast and that, we'd still be on this journey through horror because we absolutely love the genre. But it's nice that we get to share it with you. We get to share it with each other. We get to share it with you. We want to keep doing this. And that happens through rating, reviewing it, subscribing, notifications, all that sort of stuff. And then with Patreon as well, that's something that's so important. It's not integral. If you don't want to do it, you don't have to, but it's there. So as usual, I always have to do a little shout out for my honorary creeps. So on our Patreon, we've got Flicks and Friends podcast, Jamie Burns, Rob Miller and Leighton Collins. So far, they are my patrons. It means the world to me that you are enjoying what I do enough to help support me on the journey. If you want to know more, you just have to head over to patreon.com, search Let's Talk Horror channel. You can find anything more there and you can help me. And there's obviously loads of really cool exclusive that you're going to get on there. And also make sure, because I'm trying to do more fucking shit all the time. Not that I've got to try and catch up to Sammie somehow. But I make sure that you join me every Saturday morning as well, live on our YouTube channel, 9 a.m. till 9:30 a.m. For my show, Horrible Morning. Original name, but I don't give a fuck. Horrible Morning. Which is where you will find me, where I will go through the week's horror news, what I think is the best and most interesting horror news. So every Saturday, you can now join me there as well. And there is going to be a lot more coming from the Let's Talk Horror channel as well. I love doing this, like I've said. I know Sammie absolutely loves doing it. So keep supporting our journeys through horror. If you are somebody that absolutely loves the Omen, nearly said the Omen again. If anybody who absolutely loves the Omen and you think I'm talking absolute shit, let me know. I love discussing it, and maybe you'll open my eyes to something a little bit different. If you agree with me, you agree with me. Who cares? But The Omen, as I said, is a movie that still belongs where it is in the iconography of horror, a movie that is part of what helped create the modern horror that we see today because of what it was back then. Simple as that. So, Sammie, thank you so much for coming on the show. I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you so much for having us and letting me talk about The Omen. I love it. Thank you.
That's it. And you got your T-shirt now to go with it.
I generally did buy it for today. I was like, I don't own it. I was like, I don't own an Omen T-shirt. Maybe I go out and get one. So it's very good quality. I have no idea where I came from.
Representing the movie. There we go. So as I said, thank you to Sammie, and a massive thank you to anyone out there that has watched this, that is listening to this. All I can ask everybody to do is stay creepy, fuckers.
Bye.